The gavel had not even fallen yet, and Eleanor Whitfield's hands were already shaking. She sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy blue coat she'd owned since her husband's funeral, clutching a manila folder like it was the only solid thing left in her world. Across the aisle, in a suit that cost more than her monthly pension, sat her only son, Marcus. He would not look at her. "All rise," the bailiff called, the Honourable Judge Diane Okafor presiding. Eleanor rose on unsteady knees, 68 years old, and this was the first courtroom she had ever stepped inside in her life. She never imagined the first time would be to stop her own son from stealing the roof over her head. "Please be seated," Judge Okafor said, her voice calm, measured, the kind of calm that comes from 22 years on the bench and having seen every kind of family fall apart in front of her. She opened the folder in front of her. "This is case number 24-CV-1187, Whitfield versus Whitfield. A petition to void the sale of real property located at 214 Larkspur Lane, Meadowbrook, Ohio." She looked up over her reading glasses. "That is an unusual case number for me to say out loud in this courtroom. A mother against her own son." Marcus Whitfield stared straight ahead. Eleanor stared at the back of his neck, the same neck she had washed in a kitchen sink when he was 4 years old, and felt something break quietly inside her chest. "Your Honor," said Rebecca Sloane, Eleanor's attorney, standing, "my client is here today because 6 weeks ago she discovered that the home she has lived in for 34 years, the home her late husband built with his own hands, was sold. Without her knowledge, without her signature, as far as she knew. And the man who sold it is sitting at that table." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Okafor held up one hand. "Save the opening statements, Counselor. We'll get there. But I want the record to reflect the emotional weight of what's being alleged here, because I intend to take it very seriously." She turned to the defense table. "Mr. Bregman, your client is ready to respond." Todd Bregman, Marcus's attorney, rose smoothly. He had the practiced smile of a man who had defended far worse than this. "We are, Your Honor, and we believe the record will show this was a legal, documented transaction, properly authorized under a valid power of attorney executed by Mrs. Whitfield herself." Eleanor's mouth fell open. "I never signed anything," she whispered to Rebecca. "I swear to you, I never signed anything." Rebecca squeezed her hand under the table. "We're going to prove that," she murmured. "Just breathe." But even as she said it, Rebecca felt the first cold drop of doubt in her stomach, because sitting on the defense table, in a clear plastic sleeve, was a single sheet of paper with what looked, at a distance, exactly like Eleanor Whitfield's signature. And nobody in that courtroom yet knew that the truth of what happened to that house did not live in that piece of paper at all. It lived in a drawer, in an old cedar chest, in a folder nobody had opened in 6 years. Fade into flashback. 6 weeks earlier in T, 214, Larkspur Lane Kitchen Day. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, the one that looked out over the maple tree her husband, Walter, had planted the year Marcus was born. She was arranging cut tulips in a chipped blue vase when a black SUV pulled into her driveway. A man in a grey suit stepped out, clipboard in hand, and walked toward her front porch like he already owned the place. Eleanor opened the door before he could knock. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Whitfield," the man said. "I'm Harold Voss. I'm the new owner of this property. I just wanted to introduce myself before the walk-through crew arrives next week." Eleanor felt the floor tilt beneath her. "I'm sorry, the new owner of what?" Harold Voss blinked, glancing down at his clipboard as though the paper might have made a mistake. "Of this house, ma'am. 214 Larkspur. The sale closed 9 days ago. That's not possible, Eleanor said, her voice rising. I haven't sold my house. I've lived here for 34 years. Voss's confident expression cracked into something more uncertain. Ma'am, I bought this property from Marcus Whitfield. He had power of attorney documentation. Everything went through title, through escrow. It was a clean transaction. Eleanor gripped the doorframe. Marcus, she said quietly, like the name itself hurt to say. My son. Interior. 214 Larkspur Lane living room. Later that night, Eleanor sat alone in the dark, the television off, a cold cup of tea untouched on the side table. Her phone rang. She stared at the screen. Marcus. She let it ring 4 times before answering. Mom? His voice was too casual, rehearsed. I heard Voss came by early and I told him to wait until next week. Marcus, Eleanor said, her voice flat and dangerously calm. What have you done? A long pause. Mum, I can explain everything. I was going to tell you before it finalized, I swear, but things moved fast, and I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From living in my own home? From the bank, Marcus snapped, his rehearsed calm finally cracking. From losing everything you have, Mum. I'm $340,000 in debt. The business is gone. Renata left and took the kids. I had one shot to fix this, and I took it. Eleanor's hand trembled around the phone. You sold my house to pay your debts. I was going to give you half of what's left after the loans are settled. I was going to set you up in a nice apartment. You wouldn't have to worry about property taxes or the roof or any of it. I did not sign anything, Marcus. Silence. I need you to say that again, Eleanor whispered. Tell me you did not forge my name. The line went dead. In law offices of Sloan and Associates Day. Eleanor sat across from Rebecca Sloan, a sharp-eyed attorney in her mid-30s who had built her small practice on family and elder law cases nobody else wanted to touch. He hung up on me, Eleanor said, twisting a tissue in her lap. My own son hung up on me. Rebecca slid a legal pad toward her. Mrs. Whitfield, I need you to think very carefully. Did you ever sign a power of attorney document? Even something you don't remember clearly? Sometimes people sign documents during a hospital stay or during a stressful time without fully processing what it was. Eleanor shook her head firmly. The only surgery I've had was a knee replacement 4 years ago, and Walter handled every piece of paperwork in this family until the day he died. I haven't signed a legal document since his funeral. She paused, something flickering behind her eyes. Walter was careful that way, almost too careful sometimes. After Marcus's first bankruptcy years ago, Walter spent months locked in his study with Harmon Pruitt, his old lawyer friend. He never told me exactly what they were working on, just said, I'm making sure nobody can ever be foolish with this house but us. I never asked twice. That wasn't how our marriage worked. He handled the papers. I handled everything else. Rebecca made a small note in the margin of her legal pad, one she would not think about again until it mattered most. Do you remember signing anything at all recently? Anything Marcus asked you to sign? Eleanor hesitated. There was a birthday card, she said slowly, in March. He came by with a cake, and he asked me to sign a card for his daughter's preschool scrapbook, some project the teacher was doing, gathering signatures from grandparents. Rebecca went very still. Do you still have that card? No, he took it with him, said he'd mail it to the school. Rebecca wrote something on her legal pad and underlined it twice. Mrs. Whitfield, I think your son had you sign your name on a blank or altered page and used that signature to forge a power of attorney document. That's a felony. But proving it in civil court is going to be difficult because he has a document that appears legitimate, notarized, and dated. Notarized? Eleanor repeated. Someone watched me sign it? According to the document Voss's attorney provided during discovery, yes. A notary named Grace Liu certified your signature on April the 2nd. I have never met anyone named Grace Liu in my life. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, something sharpening in her expression. Then that, she said, is where we start pulling the thread. Into Hamilton County Courthouse courtroom for B-Day, present. Back in the present, Rebecca stood before Judge Okafor, holding up a certified copy of the power of attorney document. Your Honor, we'd like to call our first witness, Grace Liu, the notary public whose seal appears on this document. A small, nervous woman in her 50s made her way to the witness stand. She wore a cardigan buttoned to the top and kept glancing at Marcus like she was afraid of him. Ms. Liu, Rebecca began once she was sworn in, do you recognize this document? Grace studied it, her hands trembling slightly. Yes, that's my seal, my signature. Do you recall notarizing a power of attorney for Eleanor Whitfield on April 2nd of this year? Grace's eyes flicked toward Marcus, then quickly away. I notarized a document that day for a woman who was introduced to me as Eleanor Whitfield. The courtroom went very quiet. Introduced to you by whom? Rebecca asked. By him. Grace pointed, her finger shaking directly at Marcus. He brought a woman into my office, told me she was his mother. She had an ID. I checked it, like I'm required to. Everything matched the name on the document. Eleanor's stomach turned to ice. That wasn't me, she said, loud enough for the judge to hear. I have never set foot in a notary's office in my life. Judge Okafor's gavel came down once, gently. Mrs. Whitfield, I understand this is painful, but please let your counsel speak for you. Todd Bregman rose quickly. Objection, Your Honor. The witness cannot definitively confirm the identity of the woman was not Mrs. Whitfield. She's testifying based on an ID she was shown 6 weeks ago. Overruled for now, Judge Okafor said, but noted for the record. Continue, Ms. Sloan. Rebecca turned back to Grace. Ms. Liu, do you keep photographs of your notarial appointments, security footage, sign-in logs, anything? Grace nodded slowly. My office has a camera above the front desk, for insurance purposes. I checked the footage after Mrs. Sloane's office subpoenaed my records last week. The courtroom seemed to lean forward as one body. And what did you find? Rebecca asked. Grace hesitated, glancing once more at Marcus, whose jaw had gone tight. The woman in the footage, Grace said quietly, is not the woman sitting at that table. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth. Judge Okafor banged her gavel twice. Order. Order in the courtroom. Todd Bregman was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, this footage was not previously disclosed to the defense. We object to any further testimony regarding video evidence that hasn't been properly entered. She's right, Judge Okafor said. Ms. Sloan, do you have this footage formally entered as evidence? We do, Your Honor. Submitted this morning, time-stamped and certified by the notary's security company. Then we'll review it after the recess. 15 minutes, everyone. Inti. Hamilton County Courthouse hallway. Continuous. Eleanor sat on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Rebecca crouched in front of her. Someone impersonated me, Eleanor said, her voice hollow. Some stranger walked into an office and pretended to be me, and my son stood there and let it happen. We don't know everything yet, Rebecca said gently, but we're close. Down the hall, Marcus stood near a vending machine, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a tight whisper. You said this would never come out, he hissed. You told me the footage was old and would be deleted by now. No, don't call me again from this number. He hung up, turned, and found himself staring directly at his mother, 30 feet away, watching him with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Not anger, grief. INT. Hamilton County Courthouse courtroom wobbled. Later, the courtroom lights dimmed as a large screen was wheeled in. Grainy security footage played, time-stamped April 2nd, 10:14 a.m. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses signed a document at Grace Liu's desk, while Marcus stood beside her, hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The woman's face was never fully visible. Freeze it there, Rebecca said. The technician paused the footage. Your Honor, we'd like to call our next witness. Detective Amara Ruiz of the Meadowbrook Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. A composed woman in a blazer took the stand. Detective Ruiz, did your department investigate the identity of the woman in this footage? We did, using facial recognition matched against Ohio's motor vehicle database, along with financial records tied to a payment made from Marcus Whitfield's personal account 11 days before the notarization. And what did you find? The woman in the footage is a private contractor named Denise Farrow. She runs a small business advertising discreet document services. In plain terms, she's been paid, on at least 2 other occasions we've now uncovered, to impersonate people in notarization appointments. The gallery erupted into murmurs. Judge Okafor let it run for a moment before silencing it with her gavel. Eleanor pressed a trembling hand flat against her chest, as though she could hold her own heartbeat steady by force. Detective, Rebecca continued, in the course of your investigation, did you look into any documents Mrs. Whitfield herself may have signed around that time? A card, a form, anything with her genuine signature on it? We did, Detective Ruiz said. Mrs. Sloane's office flagged a birthday card Mr. Whitfield asked his mother to sign in March, supposedly for a school scrapbook. We traced it. The card was, in fact, mailed to the preschool exactly as described, and the teacher confirmed receiving it, with Mrs. Whitfield's signature intact, unaltered, framed, and displayed on a classroom wall to this day. That signature was never used for anything but its intended purpose. She paused. It turned out to be the one honest piece of paper in this entire case. Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, something between a laugh and a sob. Detective, did you find a direct financial transaction between Mr. Whitfield and Miss Farrow? Yes. $2,200, wired 11 days before the notarization, memo line reading consulting services. A woman in the gallery gasped audibly at the number. Marcus's face had gone pale and rigid. Todd Bregman leaned over and whispered something urgently in his ear. Marcus shook his head, once, sharply. Your Honor, Rebecca said, we believe this establishes, beyond reasonable dispute, that the power of attorney used to sell 214 Larkspur Lane was obtained through fraud and identity impersonation, and is therefore void. Judge Okafor turned toward the defense table. Mr. Bregman, does your client wish to respond to this evidence? Bregman rose slowly, clearly no longer as confident as he had been that morning. Your Honor, we would ask for a brief recess to confer with our client. Granted. 10 minutes. INT, Hamilton County Courthouse, small conference room, continuous. But Marcus sat with his head in his hands. Bregman stood across from him, arms crossed. You told me this was clean, Bregman said. You told me your mother signed that document. I panicked, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I was drowning, Todd. The business, the divorce, the loan sharks calling my ex-wife's new house. I thought if I just got the sale through fast enough, I could pay everyone back and fix it before she even noticed. And the notary impersonation? Marcus didn't answer. Marcus, Bregman said, lowering his voice, if this goes to a criminal referral, you are looking at forgery, elder fraud, and possibly conspiracy charges. I need you to understand that. Right now, in the civil case, our only path forward is damage control. Marcus stared at the table, tears finally slipping down his face. I never wanted to hurt her, he whispered. I just didn't know what else to do. In Hamilton County Courthouse courtroom for Belata. When the recess ended, Bregman rose with visibly less confidence. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, my client is prepared to concede that the power of attorney document was not validly executed by Mrs. Whitfield. A wave of quiet relief passed through Eleanor's side of the courtroom. Rebecca placed a steadying hand on Eleanor's arm. But Judge Okafor did not look satisfied. She leaned forward, studying both tables. Concession noted. However, conceding that the power of attorney was fraudulent does not automatically unwind a completed real estate transaction where a third-party buyer purchased in apparent good faith. She turned to a man seated quietly in the gallery. Mr. Voss, you purchased this property? Harold Voss rose. Yes, Your Honor. I paid full market value $310,000, believing the sale was entirely legitimate. I've already begun renovation permits. I have my own life savings tied up in this property. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of a new, harder question settling over everyone. If the son had committed fraud, but the buyer was innocent, who, in the eyes of the law, was left holding the loss? Eleanor felt her heart drop all over again. She hadn't considered this. She had assumed that proving the fraud would simply give her house back. But watching Judge Okafor's face, she understood, for the first time, that winning against her son might still mean losing her home to a stranger who had done nothing wrong. Rebecca sat very still for a moment, her pen frozen over her legal pad. Then her eyes dropped to a line she had written days ago and nearly forgotten. I'm making sure nobody can ever be foolish with this house but us. She rose quickly. Your Honor, before we go further, my client mentioned something to me during our first meeting that I dismissed at the time as sentiment. She said her late husband spent months working privately with an attorney named Harmon Pruitt years ago, specifically because of concerns about Marcus and money. I would ask the court's permission to explore whether that work resulted in a legal instrument affecting title to this property. Judge Okafor's eyebrows lifted slightly. Ms. Sloan, are you telling me you may have overlooked something material to this case? I'm telling you, Your Honor, that I didn't understand its significance until this moment. Then let's find out together. Ms. Sloan, did your client's late husband ever place any restrictions on the title? Any trust? Any deed restriction? Any prior recorded instrument? Rebecca glanced at Eleanor. Your Honor, may I have a moment with my client? Take your time. Rebecca leaned close. Mrs. Whitfield, did Walter ever do anything unusual with the house? A will? A trust? Anything filed with the county? Eleanor's brow furrowed, and then, slowly, a memory surfaced, one she hadn't thought about in years. There was a box, she whispered, in the cedar chest, in the spare room. Walter's old papers. His lawyer friend, Harmon Pruitt, helped him set something up years ago, back when Marcus was going through his first bankruptcy in his 20s. Walter was terrified Marcus would end up in financial trouble again someday and lose the house out from under both of us. He said he fixed the papers so no one could ever take it away. I never asked him what he meant. I thought it was just Walter being dramatic. Rebecca's eyes lit up. Your Honor, may we request a brief continuance? My client believes there may be a prior recorded legal instrument affecting the title to this property, one that was never disclosed during the sale. Bregman shot up. Your Honor, this sounds like a delay tactic. There is no such document in the county recorder's file. We checked title thoroughly before closing. Perhaps it isn't recorded with the county, Judge Okafor said slowly, studying Eleanor's face with real interest now. Mrs. Whitfield, do you believe this document still exists somewhere in your home? I believe so, Your Honor. In a cedar chest, in a folder my husband kept his important papers in. I haven't opened it since he passed. I couldn't bring myself to. Judge Okafor considered this for a long moment. This court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 sharp. I want that document, whatever it is, located, and I want it authenticated by an independent handwriting and notary expert overnight if necessary. Mrs. Whitfield, court security will escort you home this afternoon to retrieve it, so that we maintain a clean chain of custody. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Eleanor whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Judge Okafor said. We don't know what's in it. In 214 Larkspur Lane spare room. Later that afternoon, 2 court officers stood respectfully near the doorway as Eleanor knelt in front of the cedar chest for the first time in 6 years. The smell of cedar and old paper rose up to meet her as she lifted the lid. Inside were folded quilts, a stack of old photographs, Walter's reading glasses, and near the bottom, a thick manila envelope with "Important H. Pruitt do not discard" written across it in her husband's careful handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single legal document, several pages long, dated 11 years earlier. At the top, in bold lettering, Irrevocable Family Protection Trust, 214 Larkspur Lane. Eleanor sat back on her heels, tears filling her eyes, as she read her husband's careful, protective handwriting in the margins, notes he must have made the night he signed it. Oh, Walter, she whispered, you really did fix it. You knew. Int Hamilton County Courthouse Courtroom 4. By the next morning, the courtroom was packed tighter than the day before. Word had spread. Rebecca stood at the front, holding the aged document in a clear evidence sleeve. Your Honor, this is an irrevocable trust, executed 11 years ago by Walter Whitfield, transferring the property at 214 Larkspur Lane into a protective trust naming Eleanor Whitfield as sole lifetime beneficiary, with the explicit condition that the property could never be sold, mortgaged, or transferred by any party, including any future power of attorney, without unanimous written consent of the trust's named co-trustees. And who are the co-trustees? Judge Okafor asked. Eleanor Whitfield, Rebecca said, and Harmon Pruitt, attorney, now deceased. Under the terms of the trust, upon Mr. Pruitt's death, successor trustee authority passes automatically to the Meadowbrook Community Trust Bank, acting as an independent fiduciary. The room buzzed. Bregman was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, we've had no opportunity to verify the authenticity of this so-called trust. This could be fabricated, backdated, anything. Which is precisely why, Judge Okafor said, I ordered an overnight authentication. Ms. Sloane? Rebecca nodded to a distinguished older woman seated in the front row, who rose and approached the stand. Your Honor, this is Dr. Patricia Wren, forensic document examiner, who reviewed the trust overnight, along with archival notarization records from the Ohio Secretary of State's office. Dr. Wren was sworn in. "Dr. Wren," Rebecca said, "what did your analysis reveal?" "The document's ink composition, paper aging, and notary seal are entirely consistent with its stated execution date 11 years ago. Additionally, I cross-referenced the notary commission number stamped on the trust with archived state records. The notary who certified this document, a Constance Reyes, held an active, verified commission at that time, and her personal notary journal, which by Ohio law must be preserved and can be subpoenaed even after retirement, independently confirms an entry matching this exact trust, signed on the exact date listed, by both Walter and Eleanor Whitfield." Judge Okafor's expression sharpened with the quiet intensity of someone watching a case click into place. "In simple terms, Dr. Wren," the judge said, "is this trust genuine?" "In my professional opinion, Your Honor, yes. Beyond reasonable scientific doubt." The courtroom erupted into hushed, urgent whispering. Judge Okafor allowed it to run only a few seconds before silencing it with a single sharp motion of her gavel. Eleanor sat frozen, her hand pressed to her chest, staring at the trust document as though it were a letter from Walter himself, reaching across the years to save her. Judge Okafor turned toward the defense table. "Mr. Bregman, your client sold a property that, unbeknownst to him, or perhaps very much known to him, was legally locked inside an irrevocable trust requiring the consent of an independent corporate trustee. A power of attorney, even a genuine one, cannot override the terms of a properly executed trust, and this one, quite clearly, was not genuine at all." She turned toward Marcus directly. "Mr. Whitfield, did you know this trust existed?" The courtroom went utterly silent. Marcus sat very still for a long moment, his eyes wet, his hands trembling in his lap. "Your Honor," he said, his voice breaking, "may I speak?" "You may." Marcus stood slowly, his legs unsteady, and for the first time in the entire trial, he turned to face his mother. "I knew," he said. "I found the papers years ago when Dad was still alive. I found them by accident, going through his desk looking for something else. I never told him I saw them. I was ashamed, because I knew exactly why he did it. He didn't trust me with money, and he was right not to." His voice cracked. "When everything fell apart this year, when I was about to lose everything, I remembered that trust, and for one terrible moment, I thought if I moved fast enough, if nobody ever looked closely, it wouldn't matter that it existed. I told myself I'd fix it before anyone noticed. I told myself I was protecting you by getting you out from under a house you couldn't afford to maintain alone." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "But that was never true. I was protecting myself. I was drowning, and I let myself believe that taking your home was somehow saving both of us. I am so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry." Eleanor sat in absolute stillness, tears sliding silently down her face. 34 years of memory and grief and love and betrayal, all tangled together in one single, unbearable moment. Judge Okafor allowed the silence to breathe before speaking again, her voice softer now, but no less firm. "Mr. Whitfield, this court has no authority to absolve you of the criminal implications of what you've just admitted, and I strongly suspect the district attorney's office will be reviewing this record closely. But as to the civil matter before me today, the ruling is clear." She straightened the papers in front of her. "The court finds that the power of attorney used to execute the sale of 214 Larkspur Lane was fraudulently obtained through identity impersonation, and further, that even a valid power of attorney would have had no legal authority to sell property held within an irrevocable trust, absent the consent of the named co-trustee. The sale to Mr. Voss is hereby voided in full." Harold Voss let out a long breath, somewhere between relief and heartbreak. Mr. Voss, Judge Okafor continued, the court recognizes you as a good faith purchaser and orders full restitution of your purchase price, plus documented closing costs and permit expenses, to be paid from Mr. Whitfield's assets and, if necessary, pursued through separate civil judgment against Ms. Farrow for her role in the fraud. She turned finally to Eleanor. Mrs. Whitfield, title to 214 Larkspur Lane is restored to the trust under your sole lifetime beneficial interest, effective immediately, with Meadowbrook Community Trust Bank continuing as independent co-trustee to prevent any future unauthorized transfer. Her voice softened, just slightly, the smallest crack in 22 years of practiced judicial composure. Your husband built you a very quiet kind of protection, Mrs. Whitfield. I don't often get to say this from the bench, but it's a rare thing to watch a piece of paper, written 11 years ago out of nothing but love and worry, reach forward through time and save someone. Eleanor could not speak. She simply nodded, both hands pressed over her mouth, tears falling freely now. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Exterior Hamilton County Courthouse. Steps late afternoon. Eleanor stood at the top of the courthouse steps, the late afternoon sun catching the grey in her hair. Rebecca stood beside her, quiet, giving her space. Below, at the bottom of the steps, Marcus waited, alone, his hands in his pockets, unsure whether he had any right to approach her at all. He looked up. Eleanor looked down. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Eleanor walked down the steps, slowly, until she stood in front of her son. Up close, she could see how much he had aged in just 6 weeks, the hollows under his eyes, the tremor in his jaw. I loved you before you could talk, Eleanor said quietly. I loved you through every mistake you've ever made. But I need you to understand something, and I need you to carry it with you for the rest of your life. Her voice wavered, but did not break. Love does not mean I owe you my home. Love does not mean I owe you my safety. What you did wasn't desperation, Marcus. It was a choice. And now you have to live with the choice you made, the same as I have to live with the ache of knowing my own son believed, even for one moment, that stealing from me was easier than asking me for help. Marcus's face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Mum. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I can. Not yet, Eleanor said honestly. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm still your mother. And that house still has your father's tree in the yard. And someday, if you do the work, the real work, not the easy kind, the door might open again. She paused. But it's locked for now, Marcus, just like your father made sure it always would be. She turned and walked back up the steps, toward Rebecca, toward the late golden light spilling across the courthouse columns, leaving her son standing alone at the bottom, watching her go. Interior. 214 Larkspur Lane Kitchen. 1 week later, Eleanor stood once more at her kitchen window, arranging fresh tulips in the same chipped blue vase, the maple tree outside swaying gently in the evening breeze. Sunlight spilled across the counter, across the same worn floorboards Walter had installed with his own hands 34 years ago. She opened the manila envelope one more time and unfolded the trust document, running her fingers gently over her late husband's careful handwritten notes in the margin, words he had written for a future he wouldn't live to see, for a danger he somehow already knew was coming. At the very bottom of the last page, in small, quiet handwriting, almost as an afterthought, Walter had written a line that Eleanor had somehow missed every time before. I couldn't stop our boy from making mistakes, but I could make sure his worst one would never cost you the roof over your head. If you're reading this, Elle, it means it worked. Don't be too hard on him. Just be harder than the mistake. Eleanor pressed the paper gently to her chest, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 6 weeks, standing in the home her husband had built, to outlast even the people who might one day try to take it from her, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Some walls are built from wood and nails. Others are built from love strong enough to outlive the person who built them. Fade out.